Hi, everybody. Welcome to Google Plus Hangout with the Buck Institute for Education. I'm John Larmer, the Editor-in-Chief here at BIE. And today we'll be talking about one of our gold standard project-based learning project design elements, critique and revision. More about that in a second, but first a couple of logistics. This Hangout lasts about a half an hour, plus or minus a few minutes, and you can ask questions anytime you want in the question feature there on Google Plus. And if we don't answer your question right away in the Hangout, we'll get to them later on our Google Plus events page. So please ask away. And this Hangout is being archived, so if you recorded and archived, so if you miss it, you can, or part of it, you can go back and look at it later or tell a colleague or a friend about it. And that's all on BIE.org. So that's about all the logistics. Let me ask our guests to introduce themselves. We have three of our great national faculty members joining us today. So we'll go from farthest away first and then closest. Veronica.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Veronica Franco. I'm visiting here from Orlando, Florida. Nationally faculty member, excited to share some of my work in the STEM gifted education arena. Had an opportunity to really collaborate with first through fifth graders on a project looking at PBL from that perspective. Looking forward to sharing.
All right, thanks for being here, Veronica. And Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Gannon, and I am currently in Raleigh, North Carolina. I taught for about 14 years in Southern California, San Diego specifically. Before moving here about 4 years ago, I've been working mostly in charter schools before coming here. I'm currently at a STEM school, and we're just going through dismissal. Hopefully it won't be too noisy. I teach third grade right now, and my experience has primarily been in first through fifth grade. And I'm a national faculty member as well, new to the group.
All right, thanks, Erin. And Dave.
Hi, guys. I'm Dave. I'm out here in Berkeley, California. I've been a principal and a PBL teacher, and now I've been coaching for PBL and leading PBL 101s for the Buck Institute.
All right. Okay, so critique and revision. I mentioned it's one of our gold standard project design elements. You can read more about that on our website at BIE.org. And also, this draws from our book we published with ASCD last year called Setting the Standard for Project-Based Learning. So as you can see, one of the essential project design elements there is critique and revision. And let's talk about why that's important. What do we mean by it, and why is it important in a PBL context?
So I'll go ahead and start. You know, one of the key ingredients to making critique and revision successful is really understanding the learning that happens when students have to take a look at the thinking that goes on. They fine-tune not only their products and the learning that's happening, but also the reflecting. They take more care in looking at what feedback has been provided from their peers in a language that they can relate. And they're also empowered to really contribute to others' work and acknowledge the efforts of their peers when we look at critique and revision. In my experience with our students, it's been one of the pieces that takes a little time to nurture, as you might have students that will be glad to share their perspectives but maybe sometimes struggle to receive feedback or criticism. So it requires a lot of modeling in my experience, especially with first and second graders in the classroom, kind of being in tune to what it is that they're contributing, meaning making sure that feedback is specific and helping our students articulate the words as in terms of how do you give feedback with, you know, constructive feedback being, you know, words like maybe next time you could, or have you tried, etc. So I feel it's a really important ingredient, not just in the classroom for students, but also in their way of problem solving beyond the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things I want to add too is that I'm at a school now that's kind of new to PBL, and the students are not really used to looking at their work. What my third graders seem to be very used to handing in their papers and never looking at them again. They're using notebooks in some of the primary grades here, but for us at third grade, we use a lot of notebooks and go back and refer to things that we've done in the past. and look at how we might improve them. That seems to be a new concept. So if your school is new to PBL, that might be something to consider, is kind of that shift in their thinking, that there is a real value in going back to look at what you've done, even if it's not a piece of a project, but just sort of getting that culture built up in your classroom where we're really going to continue to look at these things and make them better. It's not just one and done kind of mentality.
Mhm. I know for me, I think critique is really rooted in the high quality work. You know, how do we raise craftspeople? So from the work of Ron Berger, how do we go from good work to great work? What's the process? There's very little we make in the real world, including all your great writing, JL, that doesn't get critiqued, and revised. So how do we connect kids to that craftspersonship really early on?
Yeah, that's a good point, Dave. Ron Berger's, one of our gurus around here, and the idea of quality over quantity, which, as you said, Aaron, that's what kids are used to. They turn it in, one and done. Teacher writes good work on top, and that's it. That's sort of traditional schooling. So,
right.
But yeah, high quality products are important in project-based learning. All right, so let's dig into some more details then. So, what are some best practices for critique and revision? And talk about different grade levels and subjects if you want. And let's hear some examples.
I wanted to build off something you said, Veronica. I think first and foremost, it's a socio-emotional thing. What is the language going to be of critique? How are we kind, specific, and helpful just in everyday actions? So I think you kind of have to build it before you have a whole class critique where you all walk around and give feedback. How do you do it in a small little bite? As a teacher, how do you practice the language of giving feedback? And how do you do it in a small, controlled setting? So maybe the whole class reviews one piece of anonymous work. So you all kind of debrief it. Were we kind? Were we specific? Before you ever release them to all individual critique of someone's work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I like to do with my students is make a chart of comments that are helpful and comments that are hurtful, so that they really can kind of get that out, the things that people have said to me in the past that have, kind of crushed my spirit as I'm asking for some feedback about my work, and what are the sort of things that we like to hear or that help us to actually improve our work. I think that kind of explicit teaching is really important for the younger kids especially. But I know a lot of our upper grade teachers who are trying to do more of the collaboration stuff here really run into those problems of the students just really not knowing how to say, I disagree with what you've said, or I don't actually think this is the best way to approach it in a polite way. They really need that sort of classroom culture where it feels safe and you know that somebody's not going to step all over your feelings about your work.
And Aaron, to kind of tie onto your perspective, with gifted children that I work with, we tend to have a couple of different dynamics happening in the room, especially because there's a lot of differentiation in the instruction. And many teachers out there might find themselves already differentiating just to meet the needs in the traditional classroom. So how can we really honor each student's perspective, but yet still keep some kind of consistency for climate in the classroom, if you will? And one of the things we do in our classroom is we do pluses and deltas, and I'll be glad to share some examples. It's everything from just articulating a plus, a compliment, something I saw that was great, something I learned today. And it stems from that small chunk that you kind of mentioned earlier in terms of reflecting on oneself. So with children, we start in our class, we do an exit ticket just to reflect on their own. And then we take those exit tickets and talk about it as a class. So we meet weekly as a class on how does that exit ticket help us understand ourselves, and how does that help our classroom environment. And from there, we take those pluses that we've learned along the way, and we apply that same model, if you will, to student work. So with our children in Gifted, we have a lot of engineering design challenges, really building out collaborative efforts. And we really want them to be able to say, here's my idea, how can we put these together and not hurt those feelings? So we'll do a plus column, things that I like, things that I enjoy, And then we, instead of saying negative or constructive, we call it a delta. And we give them a triangle, so a plus symbol and a triangle. That way students know delta means change. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that there might be something that we might be able to improve upon. That's a change. It could be a great change. It could be a change for something that we didn't think so highly of, or something that was just a great idea shared. So I want to go ahead and share with you all some of the examples that we do when we start scaffolding from an exit ticket to individual reflection to class culture, and then to that point where we can provide peer feedback. So I have here, if you can see this in just a second here, I have here with me an example of an opportunity where students got a chance to provide feedback with cards. And what it is students were presenting their design challenges as a team effort. And one of the things that we went ahead and did is gave each child a note card that they can go ahead and fill out, providing feedback to that student. So here you have what we call our first quarter menu. It's students in differentiated classrooms have a variety of student choice that they can produce to show their understanding. And what you'll see here on the left is you have the triangle for the delta, and on the flip side you have the pluses. You can see it also on the far right example. So our first quarter, students had peers contribute pluses and deltas, things that they enjoyed, appreciated, things that they felt would be a good change. And at the bottom you'll see the student receiving this feedback had a chance to look through all the different pieces that their peers contributed and reflect themselves.
And Veronica?
Yes.
Excuse me, what were they giving feedback on? Give us a little context about the work and the project.
Sure. So students were under the challenge of an engineering project as part of a larger PBL for solving how we can include bridge designs into our local I-4 corridor with an expert design firm, where students were looking to create bridges and pitch their idea so that the local firm can actually give them feedback and even maybe consider some of those designs in their actual proposal. So that said, students had to present their collaborative efforts in somewhat of a Shark Tank model, where they can, give that 30-second spiel of here's what I learned, here's what my design is, and here's all the information and journey that came with it. So this is what the students were reflecting on. And you'll notice there's quarter 1 and quarter 2, because in our classroom it's very important not just to echo what Erin said, one and done, but to keep this protocol over time. So it isn't just over one PBL, but over a couple of PBLs that they might be doing. So you'll see the left one involves bridges and such. This one in particular that I pulled happened to be reflective on a planet menu option they had to do. The far right, they see the menu changed in topic, but the protocol still remained, where they were increasing that plus and delta feedback. Here's some examples of what peers said. For pluses, I love the story, did really good on the slides, also included something they might have learned from that. On the deltas, you could see the flip side. This child mentioned they should have made their myth better, so they might have had some clarifications that they wanted to include for their next presentation. This one here you'll see is a self-reflected piece. So even though the peers do their plus and deltas to help the presenter understand, the presenter as well needs to reflect on their journey during this PBL experience. So you can see they would like to, they learned so many new things, can't rename them all because that would take too long, but really enjoyed presenting. So there's also that self piece. It's not just receiving feedback and giving feedback, but also really being metacognitive, thinking about the learning that happened. So as a whole, they get to reflect along their peers' feedback. So this is just one of many examples that we use, but this is a very common protocol because the products change and we have a lot of differentiation. This seems to be a feasible way for students to revise and improve their hard effort, regardless of what their product might look like.
That's cool.
So,
all
right, just to wrap up, to give you the full picture of how critique and revision has worked in our classroom, what you're looking at right now is an example of a collaborative skills opportunity for reflection. So it isn't just always content, and necessary presentation. It's really building on those 21st century skills of collaboration. What you'll see here is a group dynamic. You'll notice each student color-coded themselves and self-evaluated on different categories such as attitude, working with others, time management, problem solving, and contribution. You'll see each color, each student. To get to this is what I mean by scaffolding. We work our way there so students can feel comfortable actually recording their own reflection on this piece in particular. You'll notice on the left there's these numerical pieces. These are the team decision on how they believe they did as a group for each category. So individually, here they are, but as a group, this is what they felt they did. We'll do one of these prior to or in the initial phases of an engineering design challenge, and then we'll regroup and repeat the same self-monitoring process for feedback at the end of our conclusion of our PBL. So just wanted to give you all a chance.
Veronica, I just want to point out on your rubric there that the students seem very honest about their scores. So that sort of speaks to a healthy culture in the classroom where it's okay to sort of admit you're not perfect and you don't give yourself all 4s. You can give a 2 and a 3. That's a cool example of a good culture in the classroom.
Thank you. And like I said, it's something that you need to build out. It doesn't happen overnight, and I encourage teachers to really scaffold their way through this process. It's well worth the work up front to help your children articulate and also get to that point where they're comfortable providing kind, specific, and helpful feedback, as well as receiving it. We do a lot of celebration for receiving feedback, whether it's constructive or positive. We want to encourage that voice and build that culture. So this is one of the ways we do it in our classrooms. And you can even see as we wrap up here, I don't want to hang on to the ball too long here, but you can see they have, in this particular example, have taken initiative themselves to look over time, self-monitor their group effort. So their attitude, collaboration, time, problem solving, and contribution. This group decided they would check and see over a period of a month how they can work through to provide each other feedback and keep each other going as they collaborate. So thank you for letting me share some examples. These are rubrics that were self-made with the input of the students, and there are some free tools out there that you can use to create some of these rubrics.
All right, great examples, Veronica. Thanks. Let me just, before Aaron and Dave, you chime in with your project examples. So what I'm sort of hearing, just sort of frame this for our viewers out there. You guys are talking about the culture of the classroom, also about scaffolding that needs to be provided for students to help them learn to use critique and revision, and also sort of structures and routines that are used in the classroom. So those 3 things: culture, scaffolding. For example, for scaffolding, you mentioned giving them sentence stems, like how to frame their feedback, words to use. And then the structures and routines, like you showed, how to use a rubric and so forth. So, all right, great stuff. Aaron, Dave?
Aaron, why don't you go with the 3rd grade example?
Okay, let me just share. All right, so I'm gonna share something that we're kind of doing recently in my classroom. Not this. So one of the things that we're going to be using in a future project are some graphs, and so this is kind of what we're studying right now, just kind of in the flow of how math goes for our pacing guide. So what you see here are some graphs that the kids created. They had 2 different options for creating their graph. The data is not seen in this picture, it's just over to the side. But this is a collection of student work that we posted on the board. All the names are on the back, so when we refer to their work, we would say B2, or we might refer to C4 as we're talking about them. And we had actually watched, Ron Berger already came up, we watched his video, the Austin Butterfly video, where he talks through the revision with students of the butterfly image. So that's something that we refer to often. And I have a small poster on the wall that has the feedback should be as a reminder for them. So as they're talking about these graphs, we talk about things that work really well and things that could be improved. And I think it's really powerful for students to see a collection of work all in one place. And then we use that information to help us generate a rubric together. So we take 1 point at a time. What are the kind of things that make a graph really successful? And we just do the 3 and the 1 together because this is time consuming. It would take too long for us to do all 3. And we left the 4 out in this case. It's not that it wouldn't work for this kind of activity, but that just wasn't our focus. So in order to get a 3, these are the things that the students agreed needed to be included in the graph. And then moving forward, on the left, you'll see number 1 and number 2. We took 2 specific graphs that they thought, one that they thought would be a solid 3, and we moved through each of the parts of the rubric and scored them. And then we looked at one that the kids thought might be a 2, one that we might have some questions about, and we scored that. And then they looked at their own graphs and revised them for improvement. So the graph that they created, I typed it up and worked with a small group of kids to fill in the 2. And then they were responsible for grading each other's work. And so if, for this student, as an example, she was given a 3, the students who assessed her had to talk to her about what improvements she could make in her next graph. And you don't see it here, but they were able to take their second version of the graph and improve it so that they could earn a 3 with this assignment. So that's just one way that I do work with this maybe outside of a project. The graphs are something that we want to use later on, so this helps to get them prepared for that so we can refer back to this work when they're creating graphs as a part of a bigger piece, the bigger project.
And Aaron, I'm curious about the topic here, least favorite musician, but maybe we ought to title it.
Yes. And you can, I don't know if you can read who they are. They had Maroon 5, One Directions. Yeah. We have a 6th grade student who comes in to work with us, and he helped with categories for that one.
Okay.
You know, Aaron, one comment on that. Something that Ron Berger and the folks at Explicit Learning passed on to me and my teams is that it's often useful if it's a pretty visual product for the first one. So just like you had the graph, and it was bold and colored, we often started with locker tags as a whole school culture piece. And Ron Berger would say, it's got to be 4 inches tall, and he would set these constraints. But honestly, it was a visual. You could color it better. You could outline it better. It wasn't just content knowledge, but also kind of tapping into different abilities and talents.
Right. So another example that you might have seen as I first started the screen share is a project that we did last spring. And I feel like there's a real power in having the students looking at work in a group like this. So there was some revision and critique that went before these final products that you see here. These are placards that were a part of a larger classroom zoo project. So you'll see in the picture on the right, the students made enclosures out of cardboard and then made a clay model version of the animal, and then where they were supposed to match the habitat to the animal. So on the left, you see the placards from the various different enclosures. And what we did afterwards was really talk about that aesthetic. So when you look at a poster that is really successful, what are the things that make it successful? They don't always do posters, of course, but there are certain visual things that make somebody want to look at your work, and there are things that immediately turn people off. So I think those are really important things for kids to learn early on. You know, make sure the text is large enough. And I think that, David, like those restraints that you're talking about are really important for them to have. And I think it's really powerful when they decide on those. So if they can have those discussions and say, well, I think this works really well because I can read it clearly, or, you know, the colors that you used here make it really hard for me to tell. Like the example that has the blue background with the yellow text, or the yellow paper, that text was really hard to read. So even just going over it with marker makes a big difference. And, you know, those are the kind of things that kids don't always know. And it's really helpful for them to be able to have discussions about that. Those are easy fixes, really. But that striving for excellence and making sure that your products are as good as they possibly can be, I think, is really important.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. Dave, you got some show and tell for us?
Yeah, perfect segue. So as a PBL principal and now as national faculty, a lot of my work is running professional development with teachers. And I really think with the trickle-down theory, we've got to get teachers used to doing critique and revision amongst themselves and have them practice the different protocols before they do it with kids. So in the example I'm going to share, I had a building principal who was interested in calibrating project walls. The Buck Institute really wants people to put up project walls, and I heartily agree. They were trying to cement their STEM identity. They were year one as a STEM school. What does it mean to be a STEM elementary school? So we spent the morning thinking about what could go on a project wall. And so this is actually just a mock-up that I made listening to them. And I added some things like, let's move on to learning targets. So first we kind of agreed on some constraints. What should go on all project walls? Then we also agreed that it's going to look different TK through 6th grade. Teachers had about 2 hours in grade level teams to design them. And then we actually went room to room in small groups. Teachers had a chance to present their project wall and any questions they had. The building administrator, the art teachers, the superintendent was there, giving feedback in the form that Ron Berger suggests: I like, I wonder, and if I were you. And in the case of this last photo, something the team realized in this 2nd grade example, the teacher had put some great realia up there. This is a high-intensity ELD school where most students were coming in speaking a language other than English. So she had the maps and she had the toad, but it was too high. So literally the advice she got was to lower it. By visiting the rooms TK through 6th and calibrating on these, they practiced critique. They got to see their colleagues' rooms, which wasn't always true, and then they got to give ideas and take ideas. When I went in the rooms later for their showcase, the same thing had happened with the student work. How was it hung on the wall? Was it accessible? So in kind of a trickle-down theory of professional development, what the teachers did for critique and revision then was able to amplify what they did with their students. So I'm a big proponent of using critique and revision protocols with your teachers.
All right. That's a great point. I don't mind the trickle-down modeling of critique protocols. That works.
It does.
We're almost to God. Time sure went fast here. Great examples, guys. A couple things I wanted to say based on what you said, and I think this came out at the very beginning. I think, Aaron, you mentioned the word empowering, and it came up a little later when you were talking, or others of you were talking. It sounds like critique and revision can really be empowering to students. Really, it takes some of the load off of a teacher and gives kids ownership of the project. Learning. Kids really feel ownership of their learning and their work. And speaking of taking the load off teachers, it also allows for critique and revision. Teachers aren't giving all the feedback to students. It's their peers. It's themselves. So it can allow for a much richer conversation and more feedback than if the teacher is the only one sitting there in the evening making comments on papers and so forth. So great points. Let's wrap up with a couple of, if you have any thoughts about pitfalls and how to overcome them when it comes to critique and revision, or any words of encouragement you want to give people. Let me just remind our viewers out there, this will be archived at BIE.org. You can watch the Hangout again later. And I'll be writing a blog reporting on this Hangout soon after it's over, and you can check it out in writing if you want that way. So let's go back and just have a final word from our guests.
Okay, I'm the farthest in Florida, so I just want to encourage teachers to really model some of the practices, but more than anything, I found humor goes a long way. Sometimes when providing critique and revision, it can be a tense thing for some kids that have a hard time receiving it, and even peers, just as professionals, sometimes we are trapped into our content expertise and we have a hard time opening up to others' perspectives. So humor, it's okay to laugh along the way, and it's definitely okay to shed a positive outlook. I found that positivity in the classroom has been my best anchor to be able to build a culture where students are willing to put themselves out there. And I say humor because sometimes it starts off with me putting one of my personal funny moments on the line to open up the floor for the room to say, look, it's okay, I didn't get this right either, so what can you guys help me do to fix it? And kind of put yourself in that starter for them to be able to feel comfortable sharing and collaborating and empowering them along the way.
All right.
Yes, I want to piggyback on what you said, Veronica. I think it's really important to show students that even really great work has room for improvement. And they look at our. I think a lot of times when you show models of your work, students will copy it. It up, and I think a lot of teachers are afraid that will happen. But we need to see those good examples. And then one more thing I wanted to say, whether you have language learners or you, it's really helpful to have those stems up on the wall. So if you want students to use certain language, if you have it posted and they can refer to it as they are doing the critiques, I think that's really, really helpful, no matter what kind of students you have. Those models are helpful for them to see too.
Okay. Thanks.
And I'll just close with, if we want to normalize critique and revision for students, you got to normalize it for staff administration. Make sure that your professional development sessions, that you're doing critique protocols, and I guarantee it'll then pop up in your classrooms.
All right. Great words of wisdom, you guys. Thanks a lot for joining us today. I'll try and capture that in my blog. So, folks, that wraps up today's Hangout. We'll be going at it again in 2 weeks on March 8th, and the topic is one of our project-based teaching practices, managing activities. So managing activities on March 8th, Tuesday, same time, noon Pacific time. And March 22nd, by the way, later in the month, will be student voice and choice, another one of our project design elements. So thanks for joining us, and see you next time. Bye-bye.